Happy summer solstice, everyone. My name is Jaime Morse, and I'm Métis from Lac La Biche in northern Alberta, and I am here today to tell you a little bit about Fishscale art and how I sort of connected with my father through Fishscale art. So, so some of you may have gotten packages ahead of time. Some of you can possibly, if you get your packages later, you can rewatch this video. So it's for summer solstice, the summer solstice Indigenous festival that's put on by Indigenous Experiences. So if you're wondering who's waiting in the background while I'm talking, this is Lynette Lafontaine, and Lynette is here as a mentee. So I'll just let Lynette introduce herself a bit, and maybe we can chat about, just some of the things, some of the reasons you wanted to learn Fishscale art, who you are and where you're from.
Good and Jaime. So my name is Lynette Lafontaine. I'm Métis from my late dad, and he was born in Big River, Saskatchewan. So I have family in all that region. Meadow Lake, Île La Crosse, Green Lake.
Oh yeah.
And and then when I was sharing with you, Jaime, that I have some, ancestral ties to Lac La Biche and Batoche, it's through the Pruden family and Cardinals. So
we're probably cousins.
We very well. I have a friend whose grandma looked like my grandma, so much so that my aunties would say, "Let's go sit beside."
Wow.
Yeah, we very well could be. So,
that's sweet. Yeah,
I'm related through the Morans and the Vandals and the Prudens. But yeah, there's Deja, Cardinal, Roy's, anyways, La Vallée, right? 7
Oh yeah. Back home we say Lavely, but I know in Manitoba they say La Vallée or La Vallée.
Yeah. So 7 generations ago we came from Red River, but Nancy Henry came from Norway House, and talking with I'm trying to remember her name now, the other artist there from Norway House, she said the Henry family is still there. So yeah,
interesting.
So it's really been about reconnecting with art forms. So I think it's beautiful that you and I look forward to hearing your story about reconnecting with your dad through art. I don't think I really got the opportunity. Like, my dad died suddenly at age 58, and he struggled with alcoholism his whole life. But art form is really just in connecting with other people who've been picking up those teachings. It was has been really rewarding for me. It was ceremony. That was my place of being healing, and just learning our family last names. Even though there's so much about being Métis growing up that I learned, nobody said that. We said actually Nehiyaw. We said Cree.
Cree, yeah. We said native.
We
just said native growing up. Yeah, she's native.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or that person, they were even at the time we used Indian. They were either Indian or native.
Yeah.
And usually they would use the word native when they weren't sure if they were, Métis or First Nations or whatever. And then, we had to go into this big change of the word Aboriginal and then Indigenous. And I still go back to the word native.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess it's hard to use because people who are born in Canada for many generations think that, they refer to themselves as a native of Canada. So it's being used. So we don't want to confuse anybody.
Yeah, I have a coin set from my kokum called her Grandma Line. And it said, "To my littlest Indian." Right? It's
That's funny. So, this is it's going to be over 2 hours. So if you have some time, have a moment out there in the audience. I don't think you're really an audience, actually. I think you're more like participants out there in at-home land today. Grab yourself some tea. I made sure I have a full pot. I have my milk and my sugar, and I also have this lovely jam. We had a kitty cat die on Mother's Day, actually. And our lovely neighbors made a note. And they're not Indigenous. Nobody in the neighborhood that I know of is Indigenous. And she left this note that said, when there's a death in the family, we bring food. And I thought, oh, that's so nice. So I have some jam here to eat with my scone. We got some scones delivered from the Scone Wedge. So basically, for the whole rest of the 2 hours, I guess, I am going to talk to you about some fish scales, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about dyeing them. So it'll actually feel really quick once we're talking, and I'll tell you some of my personal stories. So for those of you who are just maybe tuning in now, be warned that we will talk about issues of residential schools and day schools. We'll also talk about the 60 scoop, missing and murdered Indigenous women, and some addiction. So that's all part of the story of my reconnecting with my father, his name is Randy Mercier. He's from Buffalo Lake Métis settlement, and we grew up in the mission. So I didn't grow up with him, and so really this whole practice that we're doing is based on having to come through so many of those barriers that I just talked about, some of those issues. So it's been an unbelievable trip of reconnecting. I don't want to necessarily say my culture, because I grew up fairly cultural, with everything, but it was mostly reconnecting with my family, my personal, my biological father and his side of the family. So I think a lot of us are doing that. Lynette, when you were talking about the reasons you wanted to do fish scale art and just wanting to like reconnect, and I see that as a huge resurgence, of knowledge through art. So so that's just a little bit about what we're going to do. The first thing, if you want to, we're going to do some dyings, but you don't have to do the dyeing part. I'm just going to show you quickly, and then really the main part that I want to show you is how to assemble a flower. So what even is fish scale art? I know people tune in a little bit later, so I wanted to just sort of take my time in introducing the subject. So inside of this little package, my daughter put together some fish scale flowers individually on their own as a way to show and demonstrate people at last year's summer solstice event, which was at Vincent Massey Park. So here's a little fish scale flower. Okay, so she used white scales, and basically she took a paintbrush and painted it, which is something that we've never done before. It's always been dyeing fish scales, and so I'm really proud of her for experimenting with different things. And I remember when I wanted to experiment with different things about what can I make with a fish scale, with fish scales. Can I only make flowers? Can I, make a fish out of fish scales? Can I make it, decoration? So that was a question that kind of came a bit later when I was learning about fish scale art. And I'll talk about that. We also want to talk a little bit about the proper way to collect or to get fish scales. So how do I do it? And just we, in terms of the traditional knowledge about respecting animals and land and using every part of the animal, that's definitely something that we're going to do here. So I'll show you some really they're clean scales. They've been cleaned a couple times, but they still look a little kind of cruddy and rough. Okay, so here's some scales. I'll come a little bit closer. So these ones are actually pretty dirty. I don't know, you can't really see them that well, but you can see here anyway, there's like a chunk still together. So I have various fish scales, and yeah, that's kind of like the dirtiest fish scales I'll show you is this. Now, when we mailed out scales to people, you would have gotten them in jars like this. And then, of course, yeah, so Lynette has hers, and it was really quite proper. I don't know if that's the right word, but it was really quite well done in terms of how, Lynette, you asked me to be a mentor for Fishscale work. And I want to like show this beautiful beadwork that Lynette made. And this was kind of, you know, our first meeting. And she brought, she came in for a meeting to Ottawa, and I brought her some scales, and you know, I had no idea when we were going to be able to do it. I just thought, I feel like I need to give you these scales now. Right. And then yeah, and it's a good thing because how everything's coming together in terms of being able to bring fish scale art to audiences and to artists and interesting, you know, people are involved who want to learn interesting new artworks with unique materials. So the yeah, I guess basically we connected over social media, right? And so I was just like in love with your beadwork, and you see these? I don't know. You see these?
Yes, I have been admiring them. They're gorgeous.
Yeah. So I had a pair like these originally from you, sort of like them, right? And they were a little bit different. And anyway, they got stolen. I had all that stolen. But yeah, this is really pretty. So it was like kind of we sort of formalized it, right? Through You want to talk about that part, the formalization and how, and then the like stuff we had to do, and this is part of making up what we couldn't do before.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, I mean, some of our teachings include when we ask for something, we have to give something because it's reciprocal, and tobacco being our first medicine from Creator, right? It's one of our 4 sacred medicines. And when we go harvesting, or if I want to ask an elder for something, I bring tobacco. And so, yeah, you graciously accepted my request. Actually, you're really excited, and I was just so thrilled because
I was super excited. Yeah.
And you know, the first step is asking, but the formalizing is that offering of gifts generally. And I think, you know, I like them to come from the heart, but it feels good to give tobacco. And I had made that pin. And so, yeah, I knew that it was meant for you.
Yeah.
It was a lovely surprise.
It works out that way. And I just showed up with those.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't have those scales, we wouldn't have been able to like do this together. And originally I was going to do it on my own, and I thought that's kind of boring. And I also wanted to fulfill my role as a mentor. And so I've never had any, well, I've only had formal mentors with fish scale art. So that's why I feel comfortable, you know, passing on the knowledge and sharing it, because I spent several years with a few different people, 4 different people, 5, I don't know, it depends on how you look at it. There's like a lot of people, but the actual art itself, there was 4 different people that I was able to, you know, go to and ask for advice and do research. And it's really not that well known. And I grew up knowing about fish scale art, and it was something that they taught at the college, and at Portage College in Lac La Biche, where I grew up, is where they teach Native cultural arts. And I would love to go back. I think it's a 1 or 2 year program or something, but just 2 years. Yeah, I would love to go and, you know, and take that. But that's where I first kind of heard about it. But I mean, it was just, yeah, it was something Native people did. And I wasn't one of those Native people who did it. At the time, I was just like a little kid and a teenager. I think that's when I started to become more interested.
Yeah. I think for me, I only just knew about really hide and beads. I had no idea we used fish scales or horsehair. I did know about porcupine. I was fascinated. I loved the porcupine jewelry. Didn't actually quill work, like actually the flattened quill work that we did before the introduction to beads. It was very, very little exposure. Like I grew up in central BC in Deck territory. And so the First Nations community, Stelako, that I grew up next to, they really like included us, and I had people looking out for us in school, and we would take those trips to North Saskatchewan maybe every other year. It was like a 2-day long journey, right? To go do our like tea and bannock route. My parents really around to see our family members, I was lucky to grow up with like a lot of family around me in the interior of BC. But besides going out on the land, like with my dad, and just his ways of being, what things weren't really like, oh, this is this. And I think due to substance use and the traumas, like there was just this break.
Yeah.
This disconnect. And so people in their own pain just, I just think it's been a piece that I've been feeling fortunate enough that I could pick that up, because I just really felt this ever since the time I was really little to like go and seek it out. And I was just so grateful people just come on my path. But being able to ask, like that notion of asking for people to teach you, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a humbling experience.
It is.
Because I'll tell you, like one of my Fishscale art teacher is somebody that I went to school with. And so she's the same age as me, I think maybe a year older or something like that. And we didn't really hang out. We were friends and we were friendly to each other. And I think there were a couple of times we hung out, but it was just one of those things where I came back and like her value in my eyes was just like, wow, expanded, because I had no idea she knew all these things. So I have a good story. And I'm going to start talking with my stick. So you guys better watch out there. I have a good story about going house to house for tea and bannock. I went to campaign trail with my uncle Pappy. At the time he was running for the Zone 1 vice president, and his like motto was, if you're happy, vote for Pappy. And so I was like thinking as a teenager, I'm like, if you're happy, why would you vote someone else in? But anyway, that was like not my thing. That was his campaign. And I came along and I wore my nicest pair of white, that like those kind of like woven leather wicker sort of shoes. I don't even remember what they're called, but I had white ones on, a pair of blue slacks. I never wore jeans. We took off from Lac La Biche, I kid you not, in a pink pickup truck that had a brighter pink Thunderbolt on the side.
Wow.
That was the truck that we went to Conklin with from Lac La Biche. And they didn't have a big road then, so it was like super muddy, and I'm dressed all nice. And then we got stuck in the mud, and then my uncle and his, buddy had to go and push, and I didn't really drive, so I'm stepping on the gas. And we finally get out of this mud, and we pull up to the first house in Conklin, and it's all Pappy's relatives, my uncle's relatives. So he's my uncle through marriage. And we go in, right when we get into the driveway, dogs, mud, my white shoes, which was really silly, right? I was just so naive at the time. And as soon as I got out of the truck, I had like 3 dogs jumping all up me. My shoes were toast. I had mud like squished in between my toes, and it was it was great. And then I went there, and I think that the guys there had someone like a crush on me, and then everybody's really shy, and just a lot of tea, a lot of campaigning. He did win for vice president, so whatever we did must have worked.
That's amazing.
And you know, that's really how I actually started to learn about my Métis heritage, was through my Uncle Pappy. Because before that, it was just always like kind of a blank, like I'm Native, like I was telling you before. Yeah. I didn't even know about Cree. We didn't learn about it in school. You know, I knew the language existed, and people said things to me like a stum. You know, even the Lebanese people in the area knew Cree. And it was great. There's a lot of Lebanese people in Lac La Biche, actually. It's really multicultural, and that's one of the things that I find really fascinating about growing up in Lac La Biche. And the Métis there were always really involved in the fishing industry. So my family comes from many, you know, generations of fisher people, including my grandmother. And my grandmother, who grew up, you know, I guess around the Mission area, Elvina Boucher is her name. And she met and married my grandfather, whose name is Albert Mercier, and he's from Quebec, and then before that, they're from France, a few generations. They got married, and they had 7 children. And then eventually there was some abuse between my grandmother and my grandfather. So at a point in her life when she was about, I don't know, 36, 35, around there, she left the mission. And she, along with her cousin, were one of the first people to leave, the first women to leave their community. That's where they've always been. You know, Métis after Métis, many generations. So she left the community because of, you know, the abuse that was happening. And, you know, it wasn't long after that she was, according to some of the scenarios and, or not scenario, the circumstances around her death, she was murdered. So that's coming from my grandfather and my dad and my his brothers and stuff, and it was really suspicious the way she died. So she's buried now in St. Albert, somewhere over there. And from there, that's when all of my dad's family were put into foster care, basically. So you know, they didn't think that my grandfather could raise all of the kids on his own. They kind of got split up and bumped around different places. One of the foster homes that my dad was in put him in the Mission school, which was like a residential school, but for basically Métis. And Métis weren't the only people that went to school there, but it was set up, you know, just the same as a residential school or other day schools, where they even used the same clergy from the other schools that were residential schools, right? So he had talked about, you know, experiencing some crazy things in both foster care. And that was 1969 that he was put in foster care. So that's, you know, the 60 scoop. And then, you know, after foster care, you go from one institutional setup to another, which is the school, to one of the only things, you know, the same kind of structure, which is the jail system. So he ran away after some really unfortunate experiences, some just terrible experiences in foster care. So he ran away, and yeah, I think he got married, and I was born during the time, you know, that he was married. So, you know, it's hard to talk about because you think of yourself coming out of an affair, right? But, you know, I'm here and my life is good, and I'm reconnecting with my dad, and that's how it is. And and I have other siblings that I wasn't aware of. I learned about them as I grew up. So the first sibling was the one that he lived with. He had he had 2 kids with his married life, and then I was born. And then he had, I think, I think he had a Charmaine. So he has 7 kids altogether. And I have a very kind of special story with one of them, which is all part of this, journey of Fishscale art, believe it or not. So with all of these things, I found out by reconnecting with my dad about this history. So I could have been just this, Indigenous person going about my life, not having grown up with my dad, but growing up in an Indigenous community, around First Nation community of Beaver Lake and Métis settlements, Kikino and Buffalo Lake. And so, it was really, really Native growing up. There was always something to do. You knew who was Native or Lebanese or whatever, White Russian or French so. Anyway, I think I lost track of what I was saying. Lynette, you're going to have to remind me where I was going with that.
Well, it's all tied in. I know you're coming back around.
Yeah, exactly. So when, growing up, I knew my dad, who he was. When I was 5 years old, he came and he visited my house where my mom was living with my stepdad. My stepdad wasn't there. I remember him coming in, and I was like so shy, and I was sitting on this this chair, and I didn't talk to him the whole time. I just remember like my mom was at the table, and my dad had like the sugar bowl, and he had a spoon, and what he did was like he got some sugar and he put it in his coffee cup. He stirred it, had a sip, and realized he needed more sugar, so he puts the spoon back in the sugar, and my mom's just like, I can see her like holding on to that, because now there's coffee in the sugar and there's little lumps or whatever, but she's not saying anything to him. Oh, by the way, I got this spoon for Mother's Day.
It's so cute.
Every morning my husband brings me a cup of tea, otherwise I can't begin my day pretty much. So that's when he left, he said, when he left the house, he said, "Okay, my girl, I'll see you later." And that was the first time I think anybody ever called me, well, the first time that my dad ever called me my girl, that ever reference. And he was kind of laughing and interested in me, but I didn't see him for a long time until I was probably 15 or 16, and I got a call. I was working at the Friendship Center, and I got a call that my dad was in the hospital. He had been like stabbed up. So when I went there, he didn't even recognize that I was his daughter. And that was painful for me. And we've talked about that. And I think we've gone through some healing with each trip I take home to go get fish scales. And every time I take my kids out to go fishing, we get a chance to talk about these things. And he's so willing to answer questions. And I think that when you're somebody who is, doing some searching or just feeling like you need to insert some missing parts to your life, it helps so much when the person's open and willing to ask questions. And I think that that's something I try to keep in mind for myself when people want to know things. So that's my really personal connection to fish scale art. And I know that if you and I were together in person, we could be driving and talking about all this stuff. We had a nice plan to go to Buffalo Lake Métis settlement, where I've taken a couple of people in the past, and it's so nice to be able to show them my territory, to introduce them to my dad. I can be proud of my dad now, but that took a long time. It took a long time to be proud of him. So I'm just going to pause and show you this lovely picture. I don't know if you can see it very well.
Oh, definitely. Oh, it's gorgeous.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So I keep this picture keep this picture by my desk along with a bone scraper that my dad made, because I just think they're so beautiful, all the colors and stuff. So it's 3 fish, and they're beautiful scales before we scale them. Yeah. And those are white fish. So the type of fish I always go for in terms of what to use for the art is white fish, because the scales are really nice and big, you know. So
they really are.
Yeah, so I'll show you these ones here. They're like kind of on the tip of my finger. They're sort of the same size as like your fingernail in a way, maybe a bit smaller. I suppose it depends on how big your fingernails are.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, they're made with the same material, right? Like beta carotene.
Yeah, I was looking that up because I was really curious, like what they're made out of. Totally. And they feel like it, you know, like if you're off or something.
It's important to know, because if you think about your own nails, your own fingernails, and how like easy it is you can bend your nails and cut them. So you sort of, they feel like nails. You can treat them like nails, your body, your own body. And that's how we can see ourselves connected to these fish in that way. So if you're sitting in a tub and you're soaking, your nails become really kind of soft, and they could tear, right? So anyway, that's just sort of what I try to keep in mind when I'm working with them. And when our nails are hard and brittle, again, they can crack. And
that's right. Yeah.
And break.
I just want to say thank you for sharing that really important story. And I just think you're so lucky in so many ways, you know, that you and your dad were both willing to really meet each other in the middle, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like I really value, I did get to grow up with my dad. He was gone a lot working in the forest industry, because that's what brought them from Saskatchewan. BC was the bushwork. And, you know, and then just his struggles with alcoholism. So I spent a long time being really mad at my dad, but it was through the grandkids. Like, so when you talk about your kids, and just, I just saw him soften as he got older. And, you know, we did get really good, honest conversations, but there were times where I just didn't feel I could ask him. And a lot of the stories I've learned about my dad were through other people, you know?
Yeah, same. Yeah. Oh, Lynette, I hear my son up.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Why don't you, can you want to hold the fort here? I'll be right back. Okay. Hey, we're back. We have a little guy up from his nap.
Yay.
Can you say hi?
Hi, Blaze. Don't say Kia.
Say hi. Yeah.
He's getting,
so what were you guys talking about when I left?
I was sharing that this is going to be the very, very first time. I don't know if they're going to, you know, this will be part of it, but this is the very first time that I'll be learning to use Fishscales. I haven't, other than my one idea, which you were like, oh, hold off sharing it. Sweetie pie.
Yeah, it's so great. I don't know if you want to share it, but maybe not.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I want to talk some of, you know, the experimenting part.
And
my experience.
So I was just sharing, this is going to be like my very first time to use them. So I'm like really excited.
Exciting. Right, Blaze? Yeah? Do you like it?
He wakes up pretty happy normally.
Yeah, as long as we get to him right away. So yeah. Say hi, Blaze. Lots of people in internet land, just because of your awesome jigging skills.
Yeah. Hey.
We teach them so young. We bring them everywhere, you know, and
so great.
That's how I with my teenagers now, you know, they came to all of our performances, and then I started to like need a hand at workshops, and then they would come with me, and I started paying them a little bit, and so now this is a skill they have. They're going off to university. My 2 18-year-olds, and yeah, they're going off to university, and now if they like, they have these skills if they need side cash or something to teach other students. Yeah, it's or like just to make their own outfits or gifts, or anyway,
it's brilliant.
So so we went back to, Blaze and I went back to Alberta in October with my son Jacob, because he was having some problems in school, and I just wanted to find a way to help him connect, his academic studies, but through something interesting, through something personal, so that, we can take advantage of this amazing knowledge that my dad has. So I worked with a school, and we were able to take a week off, October 2018, and the last week of fishing in the season for the fall. And pretty much, do you want some? And pretty much, it was kind of cold, but, oh, okay. I'm nursing for some of you who are sensitive to boobies, to seeing boobies. I don't think anybody is. So anyway, yeah, that's a way for us to, as Indigenous people, to help the school system adapt to our needs. Because in many cases, they are willing and they want to, but they just don't know, right? And there'll be things that are offered, but maybe they're not individual enough. So when we went out to Alberta, he bonded with Blaze, and like Jacob is his favorite person in the whole world. No. Jacob is just like, he's this big, tall, long toque wearing, caring, quiet, funny older brother. Yeah. And he just admires him so much. And I swear it's because we got that full week of just me and my boys, And they get to touch fish when he's just a little baby. And Jacob went out to go fishing with my dad, and they could use that for geography. So he drew maps of the lakes that we can fish at. Amazing. And then we actually physically went to the different, to some different places. We did a medicine walk. So this Fishscale art has really created a path for me to understand our family history and to try to repair by including my kids, the next generation after. And it's all about breaking cycles. I know we talk about that, but it's a lot, but it's true. Like, we are the generation. We are. That, it's not easy. We may not break 100% of the cycle, but, definitely I'm probably not going to do a lot of fishing in my life. So if I'm going to carry on some kind of tradition with fish, it's going to be through art. This is my thing, and it's so scientific and it's so beautiful. You could look at a fish scale underneath a microscope, and you could see the rings around it. So so if you pick up one of your little scales and they're so beautiful. And I mean, if you do have like a microscope or like a kid's microscope, or somebody has a magnifying glass or something, you can actually see that, like a tree, it grows through ring. Amazing. So you can tell fish just by looking at the patterns on the scales itself. And, my dad tells me about being able to sort of tell the health of the water or the patterns of the fish just by looking at their scales, for instance, right? So, can I insert a question, Jamie? Yeah. So you're saying that the rings of the fish tell the age? No? Or is it not the same as a tree? Oh, yeah. I mean, the rings are like telling age because they're about the growth, they're individual as our fingerprints too. Oh, amazing. Yeah. So even though they'll have the, those kinds of information from the water and about their own life cycle, I don't know, it's pretty neat. One thing I wanted to try to do is use fish vertebrae for beads. Yes. And they just look so beautiful. And I think dyeing them or even painting them, or coating them with some silver, gold or something would be really neat. Oh, yes. of jewelry, and
That's
we're using
brilliant.
every part of the fish.
Yeah.
And just in terms of the history of the fish scales, that's part of, this isn't something that we practiced since the beginning of time. But the concept of using every part of the animal is something that we have, practiced since the beginning of time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I guess the question I had thought about was, when I think about caribou hair tufting, which I've only just experimented with a little bit, been taught. So, I'm seeking formal mentorship for that art form too. But, everything is a good time, and every art form requires that connection time and to really like get to know it, get to know the materials, and then how you express those materials your own unique way, right? But was like so caribou, they're endangered, and so we can use hair or reindeer hair because they can be farmed, and so just being really mindful around like they're the inedible parts that we couldn't eat, and we're, like you said, we want to use all parts of the animal. So I was like really curious about whitefish around how they're doing, how's their health, and I know that the health of our waters, different locations can be greatly affected. So people still, are they still abundant, and
oh yeah, and that's really the great thing about like actually being on the land.
exactly,
because that's the part that we'll get to eventually, Lynette, but like we tried to do it right before COVID, and I was with another mentee at the time, and we just got horribly sick, and then COVID happened. So I'll be right back. I'm just gonna like get
it. Of course. So I never talked about how to get funding for having a mentor. It's really about starting a relationship with a potential mentor and seeing if it's a good fit, I think, and you always want to, in my opinion, offer something, right? Jamie, I was just going to share about like finding a mentor, right? Like it really starts around relationship. And it's really important to me that I can pay my mentors because there's so much time and knowledge, and it's my way of like giving back. We talked about those traditional gifts you can give, or gifts from the heart, like whatever that looks like.
Sorry. Can I take him outside? Sorry. So hey, that's real life.
Absolutely.
So who knows? Maybe they'll cut it out or not. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I think that's really important too, and I've always believed in that as well, because being a mentee, that's not just like, or being a mentor, I should say, that's like, I think of all the many years you put into flying back home, and all of the years you put into spending time with individuals. So when somebody comes to me and says, can I learn this, you have to make sure you have the time. Like as a mentor, I think you have to make sure you have the time, the commitment. You have to make sure that you're talking about who your previous teachers are, and so I mean, this is really our chance to kind of practice a mentee relationship. And I know that it's different for everybody. So what I find really cool is that we are learning, I'm learning about new technology and about new ways of sharing, and you're learning about the Fishscale art in a way that we never would have maybe done before, or thought of it, because it was really, it is important to be there in person and on the land, but this is I think something people are interested in too, and if anything, curious, like what is fish scale art? And anyway, so before we move on to some other ideas that I had, I wanted to show some images of the fish scales really close. But yeah, I think that understanding how to be a mentee, understanding, or at least have an idea and how to be a mentor is like important when passing on knowledge. Sometimes it happens way more casually.
Yeah.
Than sort of like how we were able to do it formal. I personally like the formal way because then you can talk about your expectations and you know, I just know that, yeah. So anyway, I like that we're doing it this way. Yeah.
That's great.
So the, what happens is that, you know, in terms of how I get my fish scales, some people have asked me, oh, can you hear the music in the background?
Barely. It's
somebody in their car is having a little party.
Oh, okay.
It's a sunny day here, so yeah.
Oh, nice.
So so people ask me, like, where do you get your scales from? So before I got them from my dad, before our relationship was stronger, one of the things I actually used to do was go back home. One time I got my first like even bigger than this jar. I got my first jar of fish scales. Actually, I got 2 of them from a high school teacher. I went back to my high school after many years of being gone. I just want to say hi. And she goes, and I wasn't particularly, like, I came to talk about fish scales, and then she said, oh, I have all these fish scales, and we have to get rid of them before they're too old. They've been here forever.
Wow.
So I said, yeah, sure. So I had these fish scales with me, and then my mom took me to a woman by the name of Violet from Beaver Lake First Nation. And Violet taught me a little bit about dyeing. She taught me a little bit about the scales and, you know, just verbally and stuff. So it wasn't a formal mentorship. It was like a mentorship moment for me, because she's such an amazing person. And I hope that you get a chance to, you know, meet her when we go there.
Yeah, same. Eventually.
So I was able to give her, you know, a few fish scales, which she didn't really need because they live off the land. All their food, you know, a lot of it's from the land anyway. So they're always, after that, you know, I just, my mom would get scales from fishermen. And then I can't remember what it was that I would just go back and visit my dad, even though like ish, I'd stop in Buffalo Lake to try to go visit my dad. That was becoming my new routine. I never did that before. So here I am now in my 30s. So it was really my 30s where I started to reach out. And, you know, a couple of times it wasn't perfect. So for any of you who are like estranged from your family or whatever, it wasn't like I went there, I was unsatisfied with how he lived and whatever, or how, you know, separate we are from whatever it was, you know?
Yeah.
It wasn't perfect. I went there and there were some things I was like, you know, I'm not into that. And so I'm going to leave. One time I was pregnant and the trailer was all full of smoke, and I traveled so far, I really wanted to visit him, and I had to kind of set a boundary and say, you know, and he was responsive to the boundaries, which helps, and say like, I'm pregnant, you know, don't smoke. But next time I went there, no smoking in a trailer.
That's amazing.
You know? So that was just like a process where I just didn't give up. And I just also was able to create a safe space. I mean, a safe boundary and a space for myself when I went to go visit him. Right. So over that time, I mean, that's when he told me about his 60 scoop experience. That's when he told me about his day school experience. He told me, and his brothers told me about the murder of his mother. And then his time spent in jail. And, you know, I would find these little things out by visiting him or calling him. And sometimes he'd always have people stopping in. And so I'd learn about him through them as well, and just about our family. And even fishing and just what the land and, you know, what's happening there. And I was able to still feel connected so far away. You know, I live in Ottawa. I've been here on June 16th, it'll be 20 full years. Like, that's got to be some kind of a celebration. You know? I came out here to just like for 1 year, and I'm still here. So,
yeah.
But he, you know, I lived my life. I had experience. I lived with my mom, who's German. My biological grandmother is also German, and she raised me for the first like 7 years of my life. So I grew up on the farm at Cree, Alberta. It's a really small farming community, and she was just cool. Like, all the First Nations people from Beaver Lake, you know, well, not all, but I'm just like, I love my grandma so much. Everybody has to love her too. So, but she was, you know, invited a lot. She had friends from Beaver Lake First Nation. And that's actually how I connected spiritually. Like 12-year-olds, 9, 10, 11, 12, you know, year olds. I'm not sure that they have those kinds of spiritual experiences that, you know, anymore. Or I just don't know if they even think about it sometimes, but, you know, going to sweats and just feeling the energy of the spirits around. And I know that some, you know, it sounds like hokey for some, but it's really beautiful experience. And I'm just so happy that I got like around, like, I mean, like, physically I could feel, you know, a bear in a sweat. I could feel the wingspan of an entire eagle and they're just, you know, domes. And I remember thinking, like, is this a trick? Are they like doing some kind of theatrics and really trying hard to like catch them slipping up? But there's no way you can replicate the feeling of a bear breathing and feeling the fur and the skin rise right next to you. It's just like, I understand that it's unbelievable for people, but I also understand that my spirituality will never waver. Like, I know spirits exist, and they exist in no form and in sometimes some form. And, you know, when I talk to my dad, he tells me that he prays all the time.
Wow. So
when he's out, you know, like fishing on the land and he's singing, he said that it was harder before for him. He was like for sustenance, and it was for economic purposes, you know, to fish. But I think as he gets older and he's spending more time, he talks about prayer more, and he talks about just relating more in a deep way. And we hunted, we trapped, and we fished, but I didn't know about, you know, what spiritual practices were involved in that. We just sat down and ate what was for dinner, you know? So the fact that he's really conscious now, it just makes that, you know, getting the Fishscale so much more like right. It just feels good. And he never really was able to do a lot for me growing up, but one of the things that he can do now is give me Fishscales. So that's really cool. And I have this painting behind me, which I know people probably want me to talk about. This is a piece by Christy Belcourt, and she's a friend of mine, and she made this in 2011. I commissioned it, and I put my dad in here. I just want to show you. It actually had a different meaning with someone else, but that person left my life, and the meaning has never been more perfect for my dad. So when that person left my life, I was like, oh my God, I got this painting, you know, based on this person. And you know, but it actually, like we were just talking about before, worked out. So right here, I asked Christy to put in some wolf willow. So that's the wolf willow that you see here.
Beautiful.
And it's so beautiful, and it's like symmetrical, so it's on the other side as well. But the reason I, you know, thought about my dad, sorry about all the movement there, guys. the reason I wanted to bring up the wolf willow with you in relation to my dad is because when I first met my dad as like as a teenager, you know, so I went through the little kid stage. He had this little trailer. So he was living, you know the trailers that are attached to the back of a pickup?
Yep.
So that's what he lived in.
Okay.
He had, you know, just gotten out of jail, and I just, you know, had made that attempt. I growing up, I could count, you know, the number of times I met my dad, really, you know, like 7 times, 8 times maybe. So this was one of those times. And he talked about having to soak the wolf willow beads, and then you have to work with them really quickly, otherwise you can't use them anymore. But I talked to an elder, and she told me about, I don't want to say who because I don't want to, you know, whatever, but a lot of the you'll see sometimes a lot of wolf willow in dying people's homes. So if somebody who's cancer or terminal illness or something, they'll hang wolf willow up. So I'm still trying to figure out why, but it just seems really significant. And it just, you know, I learn about even this painting that I commissioned, and I asked for the plants in it, but I'm still attaching some symbolic meanings to a lot of them. And so so that was another time I met my dad. But I think maybe what we'll do now is I'm gonna grab some water, and we're gonna do some dyeing. So those, again, at home, the materials that you should have basically in your kit is a piece of wax paper. It doesn't need to be very big. You can use parchment paper as well.
Oh, good. I was going to ask because I just have this old piece of wax paper, but I have lots of parchment.
Yeah, that's going to work.
Okay.
So that's a good question for people out there. You're frozen a little bit, Lynette.
Oh.
There, you're good. Okay. I mean, even if you have a plastic lid. So you were frozen, so I was talking, so I'm sorry if I talked over top of you. Was there something else? I don't know if I answered your question.
You did answer my question, because I thought, you know, sometimes we have to use very specific materials. And so, you know, even my partner was like, well, can you not use parchment? I was like, no, it has to be wax. But then, you know, I'm also a painter, so I know, like, lids can.
Oh, yeah.
So you answered my question, because I imagine this is for the glue and stuff.
It's where you're going to build your flower.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then we're going to peel it off with this paper after.
Very cool.
So
Jamie, could we have a little break?
Let's have a break now. So grab your jar of fish scales. You can open them.
Yep.
People got different groups. So there's a really white, well-cleaned fish scales, but they smell really fishy. Then there's the next one. This one is not, they have still some of the dark spots on them. This is one that's not, again, like as clean. And I'm showing you the different ones, and like I'll show you how they turn out dyed.
Okay. Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I don't know if you could see them. Anyway, this is the for them. So what I have is I have a little, I'll move my teacup.
Sometimes moms get to hot tea.
Yeah, that still was not hot.
Darn. Oh no.
So what I'm going to do is I have this little metal bowl here. Okay, and this strainer. So it's pretty small. I can see this one's a small one. And inside of the bowl, so again, you guys aren't really going to die, but this is if you want to die in the future.
Yeah.
But mostly we just want you to stay alive. Can you imagine if you just tuned in right at that time? Real bad jokes.
Love it. Okay.
So I'll use the really, really clear ones.
Which is that what? Yeah, I think
that means they were. Yeah, just a little bit, like a quarter of that, maybe. Oh, you don't have dye. Okay, just wait.
Okay, but no, I'm just like
you're not dying with me. Okay. We will not die together. Okay, so I'm gonna put these scales in. They're the white clear ones. Not all of them, so I could show you another color with those. Okay, so I'm just dipping in the strainer, and already, so I pulled them out, and already they've changed color a little bit. But I'll put them back in, and I'm gonna let them soak. Okay.
What kind of dye are you?
That's one way. Yeah, I almost forgot. So I boiled beets the other night for supper.
Nice.
And I kept the water. And it's this one would be a natural dye. And depending on how long you keep it in for, obviously it changes colors or gets darker. I have another bowl here that I want to show you how I dye using RIT dye. So I have a green RIT dye. It is it's for clothes or whatever, but I just put like a little bit into the water, and the water's boiled. And this one that I'm using is called Kelly Green.
Remember I was telling you.
And then.
Sorry.
Pardon?
You okay?
Oh, was I on mute?
No. I think it's like a radio. And so Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think so too. So bear with us. So the color is really pretty. I can see it. I can't hold it. Maybe I'll bring it closer here.
Awesome. Thank you.
See, it just looks black, I think, right?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Okay, so it's actually green, and oh, there. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another I'm just checking on the other one. I have another screen or strainer, and I'm going to try again with the same, color scales. Okay, I'm going to soak this. So I'll put it in. While it's soaking, because I didn't put that much dye in, I grab some paper towel. And the paper towel is used to put the scales on after when they come out. You can use a towel. It's just that the towels get super soaked really fast. So you'd have to have a lot of towels. And I find with paper towel, you could always layer them. And I usually have a tray, but I couldn't find my tray. So sorry about that. Okay. I was just getting a message from my sister-in-law. I sent her some photos of my husband who he cut his own hair last night. And he is definitely, he's a COVID haircut victim for sure. But he looks really cute in a 5-year-old cut my own hair kind of way. Seriously. Oh, he's 52.
Oh, hilarious.
So of course I had to send photos to his sister because that's the kind of wife I am.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna bring back the other beet dye here.
Okay.
And it actually kind of has a pretty neat color, brown almost. people, when I work at the National Gallery of Canada, but I always do something for Indigenous experiences for summer solstice. So this is my kind of like on my side gig, but also very personal, right? So I was teaching people how to dye fish scales using walnuts. So that's using walnuts. Can you see that color?
Yeah, beautiful.
Kind of brown, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's still translucent.
Kind of brown, but it also has a tinge of purple, like the purple of your sweater. It's kind of like a brown mixed with that. It's pretty neat. So now what I do when I take them out is I'm dumping them out of the screen. Take them out as much as possible, like every one as much as possible. And this is kind of like the painful part. And if you were here, Lynette, this would be your job.
The Métis separate fish scales. Yeah, my pleasure.
So this is how I teach. I've had some, but it's the time where you get to talk and you get to chat. Yeah. So when I'm with my kids and I'm doing this, you know, we get to talk about things, and I'm reminded of back home because these are scales from, you know, that my dad caught. So I just spread them around on the paper towel. And by spreading them around, it just helps them dry quicker. In fact, the painful part is picking them all apart. So that's where you have a stick and tweezers. Okay. So since you guys aren't doing the dyeing part, I'm just going to show you really quickly, you know, pulling apart if there's a chunk like this, you know, I'm going to hold it down and just kind of pull them apart like that. And they have to be, I find it's best to individually separate them, because if you don't separate the fish scales, what happens is, this is actually a really beautiful color. Wow. If you don't separate the fish scales and they stick to one another, the dye settles in the place where they've stuck together. Okay. And it makes a discoloration on the individual scale itself. So sometimes it looks kind of neat. It could work depending on what you want to do, but oftentimes it just looks like you made a mistake. So if you can find a way to use those scales, you know, that's a creative journey. So I'm not going to separate all of them, but that's, you know, that's what you would be doing. You just separate all of them and okay, next, here's the green ones. So I don't know if you can see the green ones.
How pretty.
Yeah. Okay. So now, just so that you can see the difference between the different, I'm going to use the dark one on the other end. So we use the really light ones, and now I'm going to use the sort of darker ones. Put some of these back. And you can see how, so this is what they look like before. So if you have scales like this, don't worry, you can still dye them, but you can also still clean them. So it doesn't matter what stage you're at. You can, I mean, before we do the assembly, you can still, you know, put them back and clean them. But what I wanted you to notice is there's, if you look at these ones, there's scales that have black tips. Can you see those? Good. So I use those scales from a teaching perspective anyway, as a marker. So once we get to the assembly part, keep that little black part at the one end in mind. For now, I'm going to put this in the dye, the green dye, so you can see the difference. The water's also not as hot right now too, so that might affect how bright it comes out. Okay.
So Are you saying it needs close to boiling, Jamie? Like the hotter it is, the faster, or the more it penetrates the scale?
It seems like it, yeah. So I just noticed that when if I have to do it right away, otherwise, if I don't dye them, right as soon as I take it out of the hot water, then it just doesn't stick as well. So that would be based on my experience, but I have no like scientific understanding of why. I'm sure there's one. And in that case, teachers, can you please play this in your science class? We're doing some chemistry here. Just kidding.
No, it's true.
I'm always looking for ways to like bring in Indigenous, teaching into the classroom.
Yeah.
Anything can be from an Indigenous perspective. So it has to have one. Okay, so now I'm putting the second lightest color, and I'm going to dip those in. Sometimes you have to stir the scales around a bit so that they all get into the water. Okay, I'm going to show you. Okay.
Pretty.
So you can see this. Yeah, there you go. So I'm just like kind of trying not to let them escape there, but I used, you could use shallower ones or more water, but that's what they're just bathing in dye right now. Okay. Is that good?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, perfect. So actually, as soon as I grab some paper towel, bring them out, I'll show you.
That's really not that
long. Pardon?
It's not very long.
No,
maybe.
no.
Yeah.
No, the part that takes long is the cleaning, and like that part that could take a couple of hours over a couple of days.
Yeah.
Because you want them. I mean, it depends on how clean you want them, but those really like white ones, you have to scrub each scale. So if I'm grabbing a scale, you have to take your fingers and do this if you want to take that black residue off that I showed you earlier. If you don't want to take it off, then okay, you don't have to do that because it might add to the pattern on your flower. But otherwise, you have to scrub basically each scale. So that's where all the work comes in. And before even that, my dad is getting ready, getting some buddies together, his brother. My dad's name is Randy, as I mentioned earlier, and this is like kind of unbelievable too, but my life is like that. His brother's name's Andy, so my dad Randy and my uncle Andy they go fishing quite often together. Do you remember this? My brother Daryl. This is my brother Daryl. This is my other brother Daryl. This is my other brother. You do?
I totally
because
do.
I don't know if it's like a Western thing or what, but I make that joke, here, and then I'm like, okay, either they're too young or, nobody remembers. So that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, I totally do. So I don't know if.
So once they're out, what's that?
I don't know if you're willing or able to share like how you clean them. Like.
Yeah. So how I clean them, I just use soap and water. Just in the sink. Soap? And pardon?
Dish soap? Doesn't matter.
Yeah. The dish soap, I know Sunlight, like a lot of people use Sunlight or whatever. But I have a bigger screen, like a wider one. And then I'll fill the sink up, put the screen in there so the scales don't escape. I've had I worked for several years without that screen. And I've lost so many scales down the drain, and and then you have to keep the water, fresh. So every time the water gets really dirty, you got to let it out, and you got to scrub them, Yeah. So it takes a long time because what I was doing earlier, where I was separating them and they have to dry without touching the other, you have to do that with the blank, fish scales, because
Wow.
if you don't, they'll get moldy or the fish smell will stay in them. So some of you may have a slight fish scale, a fish smell, and that's because the cleaning process it took too long, basically, or they weren't separated enough, like individually, like they cannot be on top of each other at all. So once you get a big chunk of fish scales, like you'll know what I mean when I say, because they come stuck inside one another. They come with like a bunch of guts, so you have to really, really clean them well. But you can clean them so they don't smell at all. And I use those ones for teaching. But the ones that are smelly, I sent those ones all to the homes so I don't have to smell them.
Well, I just want to say, smelly or not, thank you for all this hard work. Like, that is so much work.
Oh, yeah. And that's, my dad, who is, setting the nets. We go for a medicine walk in between the 3 hours that the nets are out there on the lake. Or we just chat or talk about different things. And then he goes back out, pulls the fish in. As soon as we get home, right away, he's, maybe has a cigarette and a coffee break or whatever, but he's cleaning them. So first of all, he takes the scales off for me. So that makes me, it makes me so happy, because every time now when he brings his fish in, he's going to be thinking about me, right?
Yeah.
And he has something to do for me, which it like makes him feel even more valuable, I think. And just, I think in many of the circumstances he's been in, he never felt valuable, whether that was in the schools that he went to or the foster care or in jail, when he lived homeless, for a while. So, and yet he's just so full of this knowledge. And I mean, that's the one thing. While he's cleaning them, and while he scrapes them so fast. I have some video of it for sure. So I learned how to clean them myself, learned how to scrape the scales myself. But he cleans them right away. He'll distribute them to the community if there's a need. Otherwise, he freezes them, for when he needs to use them. And it's food from the land, and it's just really great. So that's the so here's the kind of dyed. Yeah, beautiful. It's really purple, this one. So that was the kind of synthetic dye. I'll put that over there. So yeah, you're right. I mean, it takes a lot. I'll bring the scales home, or sometimes like he'll mail them to me if we're not able to see each other. But recently, when I say recently, I mean like in the last 3-4 years, I would say, I went on one of my visits to him to go and grab some fish scales. And he said, oh yeah, I went to this wedding. This girl shows up at my door and said that I'm her dad. So would you, like to come to my wedding? And I was like, whoa, if that's, I was, sort of like, if that's your daughter, then that's my sister. And I never knew about her before. So he, I wanted to meet her. And so I put up on Facebook, I think my sister is this person, and I put her name up there, and somebody that I went to high school with contacted me and said, I think I work with your sister. Do you mind if I reach out to her and see if, I can connect you to? She wants to be connected. And I'm like, yeah, because I was out in Alberta anyway, right? So the next day, there was a little festival at Métis Crossing in between Edmonton and Lac La Biche. And my dad, he said, well, why don't you just pick me up and we'll go there? And I wasn't sure. I wasn't completely, it was this trip where I started to see my dad as reliable. So he said, pick me up in the morning and we'll go. I never picked him up because I didn't think he'd be ready, and I wasn't sure there was some like communication wasn't clear, and I'm just learning, you know. So that I started feeling bad on the way to Métis Crossing, and I'm driving there with, you know, a few people, and I show up at the gate, and my dad is waiting at the gate into Métis Crossing. He found a ride there.
Oh.
Yeah, and I was like super embarrassed, and
Aw.
but he didn't make me feel bad at all. He didn't say, "Oh, where were you guys this morning?" Like he was just like, "I made it here,
That's awesome.
and you're here. Let's go and meet your sister." And right before we're about to meet my sister, I sign up for this jigging contest for adults, and then one for my son. So I see a bunch of people, you know, from Kikino, and a bunch of people from Buffalo Lake, and they're all at Métis Crossing and celebrating and fun stuff, music, eating out of the backs of their trucks, and has, you know, lawn chairs all around. And I see my sister, you know, I know it's her because she had a little boy with her, and she comes walking toward me, and just as she comes, you know, within where we can see each other's faces, on the microphone, you know, Jamie Koebel, you're wanted on stage for the jigging contest.
Oh my
And I'm like,
gosh.
1 second, I'll be right back. And then I was like, no, I'm gonna go give her a hug and then go. And then I was like, and so I was torn between meeting my sister. So what I did is I said, I'll be right back. And I ran on stage and grabbed my son's hand, and I got on the stage just in time, and I did the competition. And after I was done, you know, I ran to her, and she got to see me jig. And for the, you know, first time meeting each other, that was our first time meeting each other, was,
Wow.
you know. So I met her son Theodore, and we talked back and forth a lot. We were just so excited to, you know, finally meet. And one day, you know, I had mentioned to her that my partner and I, who's now my husband, were trying to have a baby, but it wasn't working out. Because, you know, my eggs were not working out. So they call it, like, you know, my eggs are old. So that's a, you know, an odd thought, because I already have 3 kids. So it was a bit of a shock to me, and I was sharing that with her, and that's when she said, "Oh, I'll give you my eggs."
Wow.
You know, and I had only known her at that point for like maybe a year and a half, and so I was really like, I think part of me was just really like devastated, you know, thinking I didn't ever think I would have fertility issues, because I already have 3 kids, and like 2 of them are twins, you know. So they're dizygotic twins, so they're 2 eggs and stuff, you know. So I thought, oh, my eggs are like awesome. So anyway, when we were going through the process to check and see if she would be a good donor, they found out that she had cervical cancer.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Process to find out if she was going to be a donor, she wouldn't have found out.
Yeah.
So like as soon as she did, about the cervical. So we put it on hold for a bit, and you know, we decided that we would go ahead with it, because anyway, so we would just like, apparently you can still donate, but we wanted, you know, not right away. We gave her some space and stuff, and she'll be willing to do that. But yeah, so I get the sort of timeline wrong, but there was a point where we were ready to go and do the transfer of the embryos. And I was waiting and waiting and waiting, and our cycles had to be on the same, you know, cycle. And I had this dream that I saw Steven sitting on a couch holding a boy, and everybody had smiles on their faces, but that it wasn't ours. And I started getting nervous because we were waiting, you know, for our cycles to match up. and she wasn't, mad. It wasn't coming for her. So I called her and told her about my dream. And she's like, no, I'm not pregnant. And of course she didn't think she was pregnant. And she went and got tested and she was pregnant. So that was heartbreaking, but it was exciting for her too. So, that put us through some challenges in our relationship. And, through all that in my relationship with my husband, but through all that time, this is still like the power of the fish scales bringing family together. Because I had gone, to go and get fish scales from my dad. So
Yeah. Wow.
all of, and just to talk to him and stuff. So fast forward, and she has her baby Landon. She finishes up with nursing him, and she does the donation. We make the embryos. I become implanted with 2, and we have 1. And Blaze, as a lot of people know, he's my late baby, so he's going to be 2 on July 6th. So
Wow.
it's really kind of amazing, how it all worked out. So biologically, he has the same grandfather, and it's just really wonderful that could happen. I sometimes forget that it's not from my eggs. I don't even think about that, other than when I think about how lucky and how grateful and how much hard work Charmaine put into donating for us, and using her body and giving her body in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a huge gift.
Yeah. And so after that happened, and I just had these aches on the brain all the time. And my dad brought this new set of fish scales, and he left, and I started going through them, and I started seeing these little yellow dots everywhere. And I was like, oh, what are these? And I looked down and I realized that they were eggs.
Wow.
So they were eggs, in all the fish scales. And I was just thinking about my grandmother. She used to, my German grandma, who was accepted into the Indigenous community in a lot of ways. She used to eat fish eggs, right out of the sack. And the other thing about fishing is, my dad would say, the reason the end of October is the end of the season is because that's when the fish are spawned. So in this picture that I showed you, this is what the scales look like when the fish are spawning.
Wow.
But okay, when you bend the fish like this, when you bend it like that, the scales, they sort of pop up off the skin, on the sides.
Yeah.
Like a Pringles chip.
Wow.
So I hope that's a good visual, and so that means that they're, about to go into spawning. And my dad said, you don't touch them when they're in spawning, because, well, that as part of it, you leave them do their thing. And when the ice gets on the lake, that's when you can fish again in the winter time. So yeah, that's the kind of beauty of the scales. So here's the darker ones. We left them in for a bit longer, but you can still see that they have the black residue on them.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because it adds to the overall image. Okay, so that's it for dyeing. You can go back after and play this video if you want to, if you want to learn how to do that. But Lynette, you and I, for our mentorship, we'll learn how to use different dyes, just from the land mostly, and we'll pull out our bingo dabbers and use those as dyes.
Fun.
They actually do that. Yeah. Really funny. But if you do use a bingo dabber to color your fish scales, just be forewarned that it will fade. So
Okay.
if you're just doing it for fun, that might be a fun activity for kids.
Mm-hmm.
So on that note, I've been asked, about recording these sessions. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the responsibility of the viewer and the responsibility of me, the artist and community member and knowledge keeper, is that going fishing is not something you just go and do for scales, that we would use every part of the animal. So that's where that was really born out of. One lady told me that, I asked, where do you think, this was Violet Cardinal. She said, I asked, where do you think Fishscale art came from? Like, how long has it been around? And she said, oh, I don't know. It probably came around with the Grey Nuns when they were, teaching us how to do embroidery. But the main philosophy is that every part gets used. So even if we weren't doing fish scale art, we were practicing that philosophy before. And the inspiration, though, is always the same as well, right? So the inspiration is coming from around us, from the plants that we see, and not just for the image itself when we construct the flower, but for the dyes and for the knowledge that each of those plants hold as that's also our relative, right? So we have a lot of responsibility in that. So lots of the secrets, Lynette, I'll share with you, and Erin Consmo, who's my other mentee, get to share a lot of things too. And that's because you build a relationship with your mentee about trust and but this thinking about whether or not I wanted it to be videotaped, I decided that, after many years of thinking about how to do it and encountering different experiences where teachers would say, can I teach this to my students? Say if I, take a hole puncher and punch holes in the lid and use those as fish scales. And on the surface, it's actually not a bad idea. And I think there's a lot of ways you could teach without having to use, actual scales, but there's still a responsibility there about, understanding and honoring that connection to all my relations. And really that's the sort of connection that we would actually get if we were out on the land. So I do think that that's part of the kind of missing connection during COVID that would be really important. But in the meantime, this video recording, my dad often talks about he wants people to go there and record him and make films, and he has so much knowledge, and he's lived such a rewarding but also a very difficult life. And anyway, I decided that if my dad wants this to happen, I think I want this to happen, and I'm just careful about what I share. So for any teachers out there, feel free to share this with your class. I know a lot of classes are on Google, so you can share this with your class, and they can even get the scales in advance, before this airs, from Indigenous experiences, and they can do this at home as well. But it's really, in terms of teachings, it's not just about fish scale, but it's also about the history of colonization through the 60s scoop and through missing and murdered Indigenous women, homelessness through the justice system, and through the 60s scoop, right? I don't know if I said that, residential schools. So all of that, and I'm one person. You think about all of those things that me as one person, not even me, my dad, I shouldn't even have said me. My dad, one person, has gone through all of those things we're just uncovering now as a nation. And for me, the impact is I grew up without a father. I grew up without, that connection to the land from his lens. I had a connection to the land growing up, a very strong one, but I missed his lens and his knowledge, So I guess many people out there have somehow or other been affected by, one or all of those things. And the fact that, it's in my story that I didn't know my sister existed. She's 10 years younger than me, 10 and a half years younger than me, and she was adopted out. And Lynette, you would never believe, but I walked past her house every day from 15 years old to 17 years old to go to high school. And I would see her playing in the yard and all these little kids playing in the yard. And lo and behold, that was my sister.
Yeah.
And she has her own story to tell, but she was going through a really rough time in that house.
Mm.
And as a 15-year-old, I had gone through a really traumatic experience. And I say to her often that if I could, and if I knew what I know now, one of those useless exercises, I suppose, I would have scooped her up and saved her. Because both of us were going through trauma. She was 5 years old, 7 years old, and I was 15 to 17 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. And she just kind of like casually, we drove past the house and she's like, oh, that's where I lived. And so like, I only found out 2 years ago that I grew up with her, maybe 3 years ago that I grew up with her down the road, her being down the road. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's incredible. And then now she's like the special aunt who is our egg donor for Blaze.
Yeah.
Like that's memory from the land, through our bodies is it goes through our, what I'm told is it goes through the generations.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, so that's so those are all like just some things I think about and connect me. So what we'll do now is grab your piece of wax paper or your piece of parchment paper. I'm going to try both. There's probably not going to be much of a difference though. And you will pour a little bit of the scales in front of you. Okay, so I just have like that much.
Okay.
It's not a big deal. You just have to clean up after. That's the only difference.
I have to wear glasses.
Oh, look at you pulling out the bifocals. Just kidding.
It's just reading glasses. It started last year. When I couldn't see to thread my needle anymore.
Oh no. I think about that a lot. I'm just like, what am I going to do? Right now I'm really good. I'm just like,
Yeah, I was too.
But I know I noticed there's going to be something there. So, do you have some white glue?
Yeah.
Okay, people may have gotten this in their package. It's a little thing of white glue. Well, yeah. I have a confession to make. I ran out of white glue, and so stores aren't open right now, and I couldn't find any. So this is actually white paint. This is a representation of what you have in your kits as white glue, but I have to use a different glue, which I will not recommend. So this is a lesson in itself. This is E6000. I usually use it, on like making jewelry, like you talked about, Lynette. But it's a little too much for fish scales, because we're gonna have to find ways to, or I'll share with you ways on how to manipulate the scale. So I don't know yet how the scales will react to this glue.
Yeah. Okay.
So the scales will sometimes, depending on, what they're around, they'll just go flat or they'll curl right up.
Oh, interesting.
Right? Yeah. So they're magic. They're magical. So if you take one of the scales, let's say you take a scale that's like this, like a typical Pringles chip shaped, fish scale. If I want to make this flat, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to do this. You don't have to. You can dip it in a bit of water. I'm going to lick it.
Okay.
The reason I lick it is because a little bit of moisture will help make it more malleable. So I'm putting it in between my fingers. This fish scale, it's stuck to the top of my finger. And I'm going to roll it backwards, just like you would a poster. Oh, yeah.
Ooh, is this our base?
So yeah, we can use these flat ones as the base. So you go ahead and make make 5 of these.
Oh, okay.
So make 5 flat ones. Yeah, flat that is, I don't know, it's probably really fuzzy. So once, yeah, so do you have little black tips on your scales, like on the edges? Are they
No, you gave me some pretty
pretty clean ones?
pretty clean scales.
If you look, actually, if you look close enough, you'll see, you know, a kind of outline on some of, on, you know, 1 or 2 of them.
Okay.
So,
And is that
sorry
where
about
they,
the noise. I
they
just like
attach?
having my snacks.
Yeah.
Okay, so
How flat do they have to be?
pretty flat, but not like a piece of paper flat.
Yeah. Okay.
Whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't. That part is okay. So once you have 5 flat ones, then you'll get like a second layer. These ones you may not have to do anything with. If they're in the Pringle shape, that's what you're gonna use.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so you need 5 of those.
Okay. Per flower or just 5?
Pardon?
5 per flower or just 5?
We're just gonna make 1 flower.
Okay, cool, cool.
Okay. So now we're gonna pick up a scale, and this is just a practice scale. You're gonna lick it again, or put it in a bit of water, and you're gonna sort of like bounce it in between your fingers like this. And that's how you make it into a Pringle shape.
Mm.
Now, if you wanted to make it into a cone, you're gonna go back and forth. My fingers, they have blue dye on them, so that's why they're all dirty. You have to go back and forth, and this will give you a cone.
I like it.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah,
So
they
this
like
is gonna. So this is gonna give you a cone, a petal. You know, like it's a particular kind of petal.
Okay.
Now grab Now, okay, the same scale. So I just want to show you how malleable these things are. You just go in the middle. You're going to roll it in the middle or make it more even. So this is the same scale. And what you're going to get is a cone. You can't see that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a cone. I mean, a cylinder shape. So that's sometimes you'll use a cylinder shape for the one right in the middle at the end. You'll use that in the last one. So we're just using white scales for now, but we're only probably going to use maybe 5, 10, 14 scales per flower.
Okay.
Yeah, and it all depends on what flower, but we're going to make this basic one here. What you'll do is get your tweezers and pick up your 1 flat fish scale and then dip it in your glue. Okay, I'm gonna pretend I'm using white glue. Okay.
Oh shoot, I think I put way too much glue on.
Yeah, you only need like a little dab. I'll show you how much.
Yeah, I like way.
And hold your tweezers on the end with the darker, if you have the darker residue.
Okay.
So you're gonna put your tweezers on that end. The glue is gonna go on the end that's not
Okay.
dark. So dip it in a little so that it has some glue on the back.
Okay.
See that?
Yep.
I dip the back in glue. Okay. And then I'm gonna put it down. I can still use this as glue, but it's not gonna stick So I'll just play along here. So you're gonna basically make a 5-petal flower.
Okay.
And all of the one sides will be touching, to be coming into a center.
Okay.
So go ahead and do that. Dip each flower. And yeah, so my dad was really surprised when he found out I was doing this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and over time, how it takes to trust in a new relationship. I didn't, know what to do with a father.
Mm-hmm.
I had a stepdad growing up, but it wasn't the most comfortable experience. So when he said to me, I should come out and visit you sometime, I said, yeah, that would be great. Sure. When's a good time? He said, what about November next year? So that would have been 2019. And he goes, all right, sounds good. And, we never really talked about it again. And so after my maternity leave, I went back to the gallery just in time to help prepare the opening for Abadakwane, Continuous Fire, Feu Continuel is the title. And it's the International Indigenous Art Exhibition. My dad calls me up 5 days before the opening and he says, what date did you want me to come again? And I was like, oh, well, I was talking about the opening, but I didn't know if you were still going to come. And he goes, well, yeah, I saved up all year.
Aww.
He goes, just tell me what to book.
Aww.
He booked a trip all the way to Ottawa, and he has never been on a plane before except for a bush plane.
Wow. How touching.
I think he said he went on one plane to go to Quebec, and that was like, if he's only been on airplanes for work.
Yes.
As a laborer.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Fighting fires and stuff like that. Okay, so once you have your layer of 5 scales down.
Yep.
Yeah, you got that?
Yep.
Okay, get the other scales and dip them and then lay them on top of, okay, before that, I'll show you what I did here.
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Okay, so I wouldn't normally use that much glue, but this is paint, right? So it's gonna look a little bit white. Yeah, so anyway, he comes, so you can start putting your second layer on top.
And do you fold those in more, you said, maybe?
Yeah, your next 5 are gonna be like a curled, like a Pringles.
Okay.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, and then just put them on top and layer it. It could be in between the other flower petals. It could be right on top of the other flower petals. It's up to you.
Great.
Okay, so we get them from the airport and stuff, and he comes to my house, and I know I'm so busy because it's right before the opening, and we have this artist there who's working on a piece called the Sami Architectural Library. And the idea is that there's so much Indigenous knowledge, our library is on the land in our heads, and that when we go to our houses and our families' houses and we see their yards all messy, that those are creative projects in the making. It's in indigenuity, as York calls it. So it was a request that he had to make a community space where community members can come and gather to the piece. So it's, you can go online and see it, but you can even see it through the windows at the National Gallery. But we made this community space, and I had like 5 days to put it together, and we had lots of people come out to scrape moose hides, make scrapers, make frames for the moose hides, to scrape skunk, to get skunk oil from that skunk. You know, we had all these animals and we used every part of it. And it was this huge revelation to see that my dad knew how to do all these things.
Amazing.
And to, see, you know, my friend Dana Danger, she's an artist also in the show. They came to, you know, Ottawa, and they were like, they had these moose legs, and they're like, do you think we can make scrapers? And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess so. I don't know how. And then my dad's like, oh, I can do that. And he grabs a moose leg and he saws it. And then he tells me to take off the muscle and the skin and, you know, everything. And then he just like cuts the edges and he makes a scraper.
You're like, what?
You know, we had to boil it, get out all the marrow and stuff like that. And I had just like no idea. And I spent my whole life in university and in, you know, I worked at the National Aboriginal Health Organization. Like I've worked with WIPO, World Indigenous Property, Intellectual Property Organization. And I'm very well informed on traditional knowledge. And then I find out that my dad is an advisor to the Buffalo Lake Métis settlement as, you know, one of their, land-based knowledge keepers. So that was actually difficult for me when he was drinking, because I could never access those documents or that knowledge, because he could never give his permission. He was never, sober long enough to give permission when, somebody would remember to ask for it.
Yeah.
So, so that was kind of difficult too, but then he sobered up, you know, the same time my son was born. And, you know, like I said, my son's turning 2 on July 2nd, and now he's, you know, celebrating his 2 years of sobriety soon. And now I can get access to that, you know, knowledge in more ways than one, in text and document and in person. And so when he came out here and I brought him to the gallery, I was in the coffee shop and I saw that one of the group of artists were there called Nehiyaw. And I introduced my dad to them because, of course, we were going to be going out to a First Nation called Akwesasne, which is not far, to show Nehiyaw how they made baskets, how they made their weaving, and, you know, how the Ganyen Kahaga made their baskets. So we were chit-chatting, and of course, you know, by the time he had gotten there, my dad had actually gotten there, he was really late, like by over an hour. And so I mentioned that because the timing here is divine. Like as soon as we left the coffee shop, after spending a few minutes with Nehiyaw, and if we didn't do that, we would have missed the next part, which is a guy who says, Randy? And I'm like, who in Ottawa knows my dad from Buffalo Lake Métis settlement of a population of 1,000 who spent many years homeless? And then I remember, you know, my dad's like, Michelle? And Michelle was a guy that my dad used to live with in Fort McMurray, kind of along the river. They were homeless, and my dad taught him how to do bottles. I still don't really know what that means. I think it means collect bottles and get money for it. So he taught him how to make a living off of, you know, doing the bottles. My dad fished from the waters and had this, you know, tent by the lake. They called my dad Randy River.
Aww.
So when Michelle said Randy, he looked over, and it was the security guard at the National Gallery of Canada.
Unbelievable.
Was my dad's friend, and he had asked me to go look for him online, and we looked online everywhere, and I was just like, didn't think I was gonna find him.
Oh my
gosh. Like, oh yeah, my buddy from Fort McMurray moved here. He had only, I know, and like they both started like, they were just in shock, and like,
yeah,
the situation was out of context for them because they're usually on or doing bottles in Fort McMurray or at a homeless shelter or something. And Michelle had only gotten that job 3 months before.
Wow.
And he had only been sober for 18 months at that point. maybe even less. I can't remember what it was.
Just so
Yeah, right?
serendipitous,
So
eh?
he was so like beneficial to the art project and to the community gathering and all of that, that, you know, it was a story that was meant to be told. It's so incredible. Like, he calls me 5 days before, "Your needs somebody like him, a knowledge keeper for the art project," you know.
Yeah.
And him meeting his friend, it's just, it's incredible.
It is so
Yeah,
incredible.
I have such an interesting life, and the people around me are interesting too. So I put my second layer on here. It just looks like that. I don't know, it's hard to see.
Yeah, I've already started on the third, and now I'm gonna fill in the middle.
Yeah, good. So start on the third. Perfect. And then if you want to do the last one right in the middle, you can do that cone thing, or you don't put anything in the middle at all.
I think I want to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna try the cone thing. I'm just like so excited. This is happening.
It's happening. Yeah, that's how I felt when I learned.
Yeah.
So my first teacher of Fishscale art, she worked with me at the Métis Settlements General Council. So I was doing some work with them here in Ottawa, in the Ottawa office, and had a meeting in Edmonton. So we took the time to do some Fishscale work.
No way.
Yeah, so I don't know if you know MJ Belcourt, but she's a Métis artist who does beadwork, and she also works at Fort Edmonton a lot. I see her there. She's a knowledge keeper too. I mean, she just has so much information. And I knew her before I came to Ottawa, so over 20 years ago. And then she's still active out there. She was my first teacher.
Wow,
we learned in a
cool.
hotel in Edmonton.
Yeah.
My second teacher was Violet, the lady I've been talking about this whole time. And she's, I think she's from Goodfish Lake, but resides in maybe both, or Beaver Lake or something.
Okay.
I uncovered a picture of her husband Lumberjack the other day, which I posted on my Instagram. And I do post some of my artwork on Instagram from time to time. So if you guys wanted to go and check it out, it's Mrs. Jaime, JAIME_Morse. And I realize it's extra to put Mrs., but all the other handles were taken after I changed my name from Koebel to Morse. Yeah, so my husband's like, "Really? You're putting Mrs. Jaime Koebel?" It's like, that's kind of like extra. I'm like, well, that's who I am. I'm colonizing your last name. Just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm making his last name Métis.
So I think, so this is my very first flower, and I'm like,
I'm
already seeing how like it can be very fragile, while the can I even see that? No.
Bend it down more. Down. Okay. Oh, it's pretty. I think I just showed everybody my feelings from that. Okay, my husband and my son are home, so we're actually close to wrapping up. I think we have almost 2 hours.
Oh yeah.
So all that to say is that this is the flower you can make. You can make buds by getting a flower. I'm going to use the green since I've made it. So you just use the scale, like the half bent, I'm going to call it. And then the other one, you roll it into the cone. And then you can place it inside the other one. So sweet. I want to show you the sampler piece.
Yes.
So this is my teaching tool. So that's why it looks a little kind of jagged on the edges, but it's a teaching tool because I got it framed, Patrick Gordon Framing here in Ottawa, who actually had to like build this frame because they didn't know how to make it. But it's a hook The reason I put a hook on it was to protect it for when I'm traveling to schools and stuff. As I do teach it in schools. So here's the samples. Okay, so that's my hair in the way there, sorry. This one is made out of a dyed yellow stem, is a porcupine quill. Okay, flower, and for the grass on the side is kind of a teal blue dyed moose hair. This one I just wanted to make a wheat. So it's a different color yellow, and I put these kind of little wisps of moose caribou hair, and that's so caribou hair as well, dyed.
Wow.
Okay, and here is kind of smaller flowers with purple tops. Some of them are imaginary flowers. You know, I just thought it was really pretty. Little butterfly at the top. Hard to see, I know. We'll post pictures. I post pictures on my artist-Jamie Koebel Facebook page. So this one is fox hair.
So sweet.
Yeah. And fish scales, of course. And see, look at all the little flowers on that one.
Yeah.
So you can get really creative. Yeah. Here's another little bouquet. So now that you know how to, there's some more fox hair, and this one's beaver fur. And now that you know how to manipulate the scales, you know, you could pretty much go from here and experiment. Oops. You can pretty much go from here and just experiment with looking at flowers, you know, in all different ways of bending and rolling and gluing. You can try other materials like I had used with the fox fur and the beaver fur and stuff.
Yeah.
So what you can do with this flower now that it's done, you know, or you keep working on another flower if you want, is you can peel it off. Like I can't because it's paint. So I'm going to pretend I just peeled this flower off of the wax paper. And that's why you use wax papers, because you want to be able to peel it off. And you would think fish scales are really kind of fragile. And in some ways they are, but once they're glued together, they're a stronger sort of unit. So you won't really have as much of a risk of breaking. But if it's in a dry environment for too long, it could start cracking, like if you touch it. But if it's behind the frame, usually fish scale work is done on black velvet. That's the sort of traditional way that I've seen it. But we've also seen it on moccasins. I think I've seen a couple from the Beta Museum. Yeah, because, you know, I put them on moccasin vamps as well for missing and murdered Indigenous women installation. Yeah, walking with our sisters. Yeah, I made 5 pairs of vamps for them, and I really like the fish scale ones. I made them in honor of my grandmother, because she's a fisherwoman, you know.
Yeah.
So the material doesn't have to be velvet, but for instance, there are earrings out of them, and they're really beautiful. I have a couple of pairs of her earrings. So she got creative, and remember when I said I'd come back to this about what can you make? Can you make just flowers? So when I asked Violet, she's like, well, I don't see why not, she said. But there was also something else that she talked about later about knowing the rules before you break them. So that's just, I think, about the sort of like way in which you pass on the knowledge and stuff. But I think once you go through that kind of mentorship, you know, with anything, not just fish scale art, but you see artists who are woodlands artists or Haida art, and you know, they're kind of breaking the rules of their historic style of art, but that's because they know it, right? So they've gotten permission somewhere, or they've had a urge or a dream or something to change it. And I think that's how we be patient, sort of, for people who have what we think of as crazy ideas, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, that's some of the materials you can do the fish scale art on. Do you have any questions?
I guess I'm curious to know how long this has to sit, or it's really where I should plunk it off. I guess
I would leave it for the whole day, and then you can start, like, you can add it to jewelry, you know, or whatever after. But so when I say add it to jewelry, I'll show you what I brought here. So yeah, oops, I could see, so I've had this idea of not flowers for earrings, but just like more, I'm putting this out there so nobody steals it yet. Okay, give me some time to get it out there, guys. I say it's mine. So this is a safety pin with fish scales on it, but I basically was thinking of, you know, having like scales coming down and then having some beads in there, you know.
Very cute. Yeah.
So that's the sort of, and I thought you could use all kinds of, you know, earring hooks. So I have these here. I'm not going to show you how to make the earring. The goal was just to kind of give you a bit of a history about fish scale art and about some of the barriers that in general Indigenous people are going through to try to reclaim their culture. And definitely we have all of the historic traumas that we're uncovering over the past few years right within our family. And it's such a incredible connection with these fish scales to understanding and learning about that trauma, but then healing it. And so that's why I call this, you know, session Mending the Net. My dad actually makes nets too. So
Wow.
he's a trapper and a, you know, he's I'm learning so much, and there's still, you know, so much. He's going to make me an elder one of these days with all information he's going to pass on, you know? So I think, you know, I think that's pretty cool. Please post your pictures of your scales on the Summer Solstice Indigenous Festival. I'm not sure of the hashtag, but I'm pretty sure they'll tell you at the beginning of this program or the hour afterward. But I would just love to see it, or you can just send it directly, you know, tag me on Instagram or Facebook, because this is the first time I've ever taught remotely, and I'd like to see how the flowers turned out to see if I did an okay job of walking people through the steps. So it's actually quite easy, isn't it?
I just like want to make a few more, like it's quite special and beautiful. So Canas Compton, Mr. He, Jamie, for sharing this, and I had a lovely.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. So excited and grateful, and just want to spend time with them here for a little while longer.
Yeah. So it's just like this thing that is not even really known about, you know, and all Métis don't do it. So like it came from sort of northern Alberta, in that area, from the First Nations and Métis. So that was something that was, you know, shared art form between the two of them up there. And I just think it's so special that I need to share it with everybody. So
I appreciate that, Jamie.
I'm doing by the time this conversation airs or goes live, I'll have done a fish glue making session with Erin. So if you wanted to tune into that, yourself, Lynette, or anybody else, if they wanted to go back, it'll probably be saved on the recording somewhere. So
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Wonderful.
With that, I want to say thank you so much, Lynette, for asking me to be a mentor and having somewhere to pass this on to, who, you know, someone who's eager to learn and like makes the steps and is proactive. And I like teaching people who want to learn. And it's so much more of a pleasure, you know. So thank you for asking me and making me feel important, and
thank you for saying yes.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Awesome.
So with that, we'll say Kinanas Gomiten, and we'll see you around.
Samaga.
Okay, Smaga.